theology, Christian belief, has deeply influenced our society, has got into and fed the very roots of humanism. So we should not be at all surprised that religious believers and non-believers are sometimes affirming exactly the same thing. And there's nothing un-Christian about that. If you look at the history of the early church had no scruples at all about taking over the best values of the classical world. There's one quite extraordinary quotation from one of the most distinguished scholars of the early church, Jerome, in the 5th century, who wrote to a young friend of his who was just about to be ordained. And he said, "Finally, would you know what sort of apparel the Lord requires you to wear? Prudence, justice, moderation, courage. These are 4 virtues which should fill your horizon. Think of them as a 4-horse team bearing you, Christ's charioteer, along at full speed to your goal. No necklace can be more precious than these. No gems could create brighter galaxy." Do you recognize those 4 values? Prudence, justice, moderation, courage. They're the 4 classical virtues of the Roman world. The church had no problem about incorporating these values, baptizing them, in the same way that it had no problems about incorporating much of Greek philosophy and Greek and Roman art. So there's nothing un-Christian about having, it's not selling out for religious people to find that there's a huge amount in common. What distinguishes it, of course, is the motivation for a person's beliefs. For Dworkin, what his overall position is to live a life that you can take pride in. That's his overall ethical position, which he expressed in the moral commitment to recognize the dignity of other people. It seems to me, without denying that, a religious believer will have a wider interpretation, which will talk in terms of allowing to God to work in one or imitating Christ. There are various ways of talking about it. That's not the point. But there will be a different fundamental motivation, but there will be a great deal of overlap in the end in the values which are put forward. And I think that's really all I want to say. A lot more, of course, one could say, but I hope there'll be a few questions in people's minds that we can carry some of that discussion further. Anybody feel able to begin with a question on any of that? There's a lady there, yes.
Why do you think that it became thought that people religious would side on the idea that what God commands is good? Is it simply because they read the Decalogue, or is it the organised religion that everything does?
I think it is because clearly the predominant impression from the Bible is that it is a divine command ethic. I don't think you can get away from that. As you say, the Decalogue is there. The Bible is full of things about, say God says do this, God says don't do that. So it is undoubtedly there as the major strands. It's not surprising. All I was suggesting is that it's not the only strand there, and we need to pay attention to that other strand. I think we also need to bear in mind that one of the unfortunate features of the modern world is that we've disassociated morality from metaphysics and aesthetics, beauty. The medieval period had a wonderful kind of architectonic vision where truth and beauty and order and morality were all seen as part of a whole. And so when a philosopher like Boethius, or as later taken up by Dante, talks about the divine law, they don't so much mean something moral, people telling you to do this, not to do that. They mean the beauty of the whole ordered universe, the beauty of the whole ordered cosmos, which is reflected in the wonderful rhythm of natural laws, which is reflected in the elegance and harmony and beauty of works of art, and which is reflected also in the beauty of people's lives when they live ordered good lives. So unfortunately, I think it is Protestantism, and I suppose as a member of the Church of England, I'm a member of a Reformed church as well as a Catholic. But it's Protestantism, I think, particularly emphasise this idea that ethics is all about commanding, Whereas before that, in the whole classical Christian tradition, it's a much more beautiful and harmonious whole. Yes?
In Boethius' The Consolation of Philosophy, Lady Philosophy reminds Boethius that man is made up of Aristotle's three souls,
Yes.
as well as that Platonic journey to illumination.
Yes.
And for quite a while, Boethius stood as like the official translator of the Greek philosophies.
Yes.
Was there a particular philosopher that kind of usurped his power and pushed his teachings out of mainstream Christianity?
That you seem to be very knowledgeable about Boethius. Well. Excellent. I think it would be true to say that Plato or Neoplatonism was the dominant force in Christianity until St. Thomas Aquinas, who we, as know, rediscovered Aristotle and put Aristotle back into the main Catholic tradition. But Platonism or Neoplatonism has always been a kind of fellow traveller with Christianity. It's deeply influenced Christianity, as you rightly suggest, influenced Boethius, and keeps on coming back. Came back with the Cambridge Platonists in the 18th century, and I think I heard Professor Cottingham this morning admitting that he was sympathetic to a kind of Christian Platonic vision. Because if you feel the appeal of things like beauty or goodness or truth, if you feel that there is something magnetic about them, something which lures you to them and impels you to respond to them, then you're almost halfway to a kind of Platonic view, aren't you, of them. So it's very understandable that Platonism, in one form or another, should have been very much seen as a kind of friend and ally of Christianity.
Plato took a lot of inspiration from like Orphism, though, as in the Mysteries of Orpheus.
Right.
And the things he wrote about Dionysus. How
Right.
is it that ended up with Nietzsche's In the Birth of Tragedy, the Apollonian and Dionysus?
Gosh, we're getting into deep water here. How did all that end up with Nietzsche? I mean, I think there's too big a jump to really go into at the moment. I mean, Nietzsche is such a feature on his own. I mean, Nietzsche stands for the great assertion of the human will, which emerged in the 19th century. And Nietzsche, in some respects, is a kind of the logical outcome of a particular kind of humanism. Huge emphasis. It is the human and the human alone and the human will. So I'm not saying it's the inevitable step to take, but that's one possible option, isn't it? But I don't think I can really answer the question as to any more than why he should have used those myths in such a totally different way. Another question, yes?
Earlier you mentioned the idea of value moralism, that one's ethics and morality are consistent with their judgment.
Yes.
Surely, for example, if a poor person has to steal food to eat,
Yeah.
they might be going against their ethics and morality, but their judgment is that if they don't eat, they won't survive. So surely that's quite a flawed argument.
Well, I'm not quite sure whether we perhaps mean by the same the same thing, but let me take that particular thing. St. Thomas Aquinas argued that if a person was really in need, then it would be justified to steal. So what he's suggesting is that although, to all intents and purposes, 99.9% of the time, of course we should respect other people's property and we should not steal, he sees this as part of a wider whole, which, in the case of stealing, would be in that particular example, that wider whole would be the overall good of other people, particularly the good of other people in need. So, if you like, and the injunction not to steal in the first place is part of a wider whole, which is the good of other people expressed in an ordered society where we respect other people's property. So what that seems to suggest is that the whole time there is a sort of a wider circle in which things can be seen to cohere together. Any other? Yes?
Do you think Dawkins is linked to Wittgenstein's ideas of language?
He's not Dworkin's not a language philosopher in any way, I don't think. I mean, Dworkin is very much more traditional, straightforward philosopher. In a previous age, he might, he might have been a metaphysician, but I don't think he's a language philosopher. No, I wouldn't call him one. He's probably primarily a legal philosopher, but he's equally at home as a political philosopher. And as we've been talking about today, he sees his legal philosophy and his political philosophy must be rooted in a proper understanding of moral philosophy, which is what I've been dealing with today. Perhaps one more last question. I know that Stephen wants a moment to turn round. And, yes, sorry, yes.
What would you say, or what would Dworkin say to someone who would say, well, taking dignity and living well and living a good life, making those your assumptions for your ethics, is begging the question, because those are philosophies themselves. So having a good life, living well, there's no culture-free way of doing it.
Yes, absolutely. No, he would say there's no culture-free way of doing it, but what he would argue, first of all, is that your understanding what it is to live a good life or to live well must be one which encompasses every aspect of your moral life. Your political view as well as your personal morality and your political morality, all that he means by value holism. But my point, and I think this, is linked in with the very proper question you're raising. There can be no logical reason, no logical justification which will make sense of this desire we share to live lives we can take pride in. I mean, that's emerged from him, as I'm suggesting, as a fundamental conviction. This is where I think Dworkin really fails, because he's got these fundamental convictions, the dignity of other people, and living a life that you can take pride in, and they're absolutely fundamental to him. But what I'm suggesting is actually, as human beings, these cry out for a wider interpretation. Now, there may not be a wider interpretation. I quite accept there may not be. He doesn't think there is, and therefore he has this very moving statement which I read out to you, tiny diamonds in the cosmic sand. That's his view. They are diamonds, but there's a cosmic sand. For a religious believer, they're not tiny diamonds in a cosmic sand. They are immortal diamonds. I think that's probably all people want to ask. Thank you very much indeed for your questions.